is now 7:01. I'd like to call to order the East Point Planning Commission meeting of October 6th, 2022. Before we go on to the roll call, let me welcome back Commissioner Lubeck from his hiatus. So I'm sure we will all enjoy his energetic discourse. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Broll.
Present.
Mr. Lalonde.
Here.
Ms. Munoz.
Here.
Mr. Lubeck.
Here.
Ms. Ulinski here. Chairman DeHunt.
Here.
Kimberly Naylor. Anybody hear from her?
No. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion for that approval, please?
I'll make that motion.
I second that. I have a motion and support. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Lubeck.
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde.
Yes.
Mr. Broll.
Yes.
Ms. Munoz.
Yes.
Ms. Ulinski, yes. Chairman DeHunt.
Yes. Moving on, we are going to the first hearing of the public. If anybody wishes to be heard, they have 3 minutes to speak. Please write your name down on the piece of paper that should be at the podium there. As we have nothing for a public hearing, you can speak on whatever you want to speak on. So, hearing of the public is now open.
Gary Myron, East Point resident. Welcome back, Jeff. And another question is MDOT. Does MDOT have to come to the commission board for any work to be done in the city? Like the street lights out front here on City Hall? Like the control boxes? And if they don't come to the commission on permission on where to put them, locating, and why they don't have to come to the planning commission for any work to be done? MDOT, I'm just curious. That's it. Short and sweet.
Thank you, Mr. Myron. Does anyone else wish to be heard? Anyone else? Seeing none, I will close the hearing of the public, and we move on to the approval of the meeting minutes. Did everybody get their revised copies? There should be hard copies up here that Ms. Holman has supplied. Any changes to the minutes, or shall we have a motion to approve them?
I'd like to make a change to them.
Okay,
Under also present, I believe our fire marshal was present, and I believe when he's present, he should be listed.
okay.
There was one other change on page 3 under new business. I would suggest that we strike the last part of the first sentence. It says, Chairman DeHunt suggested tabling the discussion. Commissioner Muniz asked about a typical process and practice of how long an item gets tabled, and I think it should end there, because the next part of that sentence doesn't make sense.
That's the answer to the question.
It's the answer to
The answer to your question.
To my question, right, but it's not written in a way that makes that clear. So maybe if we can just correct how it's.
Can we restate the grammar on that so it is phrased in the form of an answer?
Can you tell me where?
Page 3.
Under new business, item C. And it's the sentence that starts, Chairman DeHunt suggested tabling the discussion. Commissioner Muniz asked about a typical process and practice of how long an item gets tabled. And then it says, which usually is at the next meeting. I was just saying we should strike that last sentence, or it needs to be created in its own sentence. Like if that's the answer, then who gave that answer? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense in context to what was asked.
I agree.
So, Chair, how would you like to amend the meeting minutes?
Let's put in there a separate sentence that simply says, I don't remember who, if there's a way to review who said it, whether it was myself or somebody else said that the typical response time is 1 month, let's just put a sentence in there stating that. If we can review who said it, and then just say Commissioner so-and-so stated that the usual turnaround time is 1 month. Sound fair?
I don't have the secretary.
You could just rephrase it. It was explained that is usually the next meeting. And then we don't have to worry about who said it.
Okay, so any other corrections or additions? Okay, so is anybody willing to make the motion with those 2 corrections?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
We have motion and support. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Lubeck?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde?
Yes.
Mr. Broll?
Yes.
Ms. Muniz?
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. And Chairman DeHunt?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Ms. Zelinski, what was your vote?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure what I heard.
Oh,
We have no public hearing
Great to have
tonight,
you.
so we will move on. Next item, under new business, recognition of former Planning Commissioner Chair Palazzolo. I would like to defer to Ms. Holman to that, if I may. I know that his schedule is very difficult on Thursdays, so that's the reason why he stepped down. So might need to find a different way to do this. So just keep that in mind. But I'll let you reach out to him. Did anybody have any questions about that item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the second item of new business. This was something that I asked to be put onto the meeting tonight because something had struck me when Ms. Brashevsky had brought it up about maybe our parking standards are outmoded and things have changed. And then I was also speaking to somebody on this, in the committee or commission here that had questions about the parking agreement. And so I thought, let's put it back on the table and let's talk about this. So can I kick this off to you and you can bring us up to date?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Nice conversation here, very nice chair. We, in this packet, have the shared parking agreement process. Do you want me to sorry about that. Do you want me to outline the process for the shared parking agreement?
Before you go over the shared parking agreement, I'd rather start with the changes that have occurred, that you had mentioned, that there were changes within the state or parking guidelines or requirements. I just want to understand a little bit more about that. Could have swore you said it during the last meeting. That things had changed, that maybe our parking standards are a little outmoded and that.
Oh, okay. Well, in general, like generally speaking, all city ordinance parking minimums are outdated. That we use research based off of the International Transportation Facilities Act, and this act is based off of several case studies only. And this act guides parking minimum standards throughout the country. So you can see that there's some biases within the research if a national study or a national act uses only several bits of research from cities as the standing core criteria to set parking regulations. So within that, there's some errors within the research within itself. And so cities base their zoning ordinance parking minimum standards off of well, off of this Transportation Act that I just mentioned, but then also we use other cities to compare our standards against, and no one really has good standards to measure parking. So that's the point of the story. I can prepare more to speak on that at a different time. I was unaware that I'm going to be speaking on this today, so I can just give you a little gist of it. But yeah, that's something that we need to consider, and we are going to talk about that in the October meeting for our steering committee group on the zoning ordinance rewrite, how we can address parking minimums and what makes sense for the city. So I will have more material prepared for that. We do know that the city of Utica got rid of their parking minimum standards in their downtown district. This is a trend that many cities are participating in. Also, the city of Ferndale did the same thing. The city of Hamtramck also doesn't have any parking standards in their downtown. The city of Ecorse as well. But we're working on a comparative analysis between different cities, and including East Point, on all of the parking standards that they have to see where East Point falls within this comparative analysis. However, I just want to put a disclaimer out there. A lot of these cities already, they use research that is proven to have flaws within it. So
So are you telling us this is kind of virgin territory, it's untapped, we're,
kind of, it is a breaking trend. If you read urban planning news, a lot of the headlines are, how can we reform our parking standards? What went wrong?
okay?
So it is a hot topic.
It just seems to me that the topic of parking dovetails well with our shared parking agreement and some of the questions that were brought up about the shared parking agreement. It just seemed like a nice way to get a 1-2 punch in there and have a good discussion about it. If I may, I'd like to ask the commission if anybody has any thoughts or comments about our parking or shared parking agreement. I know that Commissioner Lubeck was on the tail end as it was getting ready to go into effect. So I'm sure he might have some thoughts, but if anybody else has some questions or thoughts about it, I'd love to open the conversation here.
I actually have a question for Mara. We were talking about the other cities getting rid of their parking minimums. Is that, for their downtowns, is that because a lot of them have replaced it with municipal paid lots or parking garages, or just got rid of it altogether?
That's a great question, and that's what I'm balancing right now within my research, or within our research, to understand if this makes sense for East Point. Like Ferndale has a parking garage, but East Point doesn't. Does Utica have a parking garage? No.
Not downtown.
Ecorse, they don't have a parking garage. Ann Arbor does have a parking garages. So
They have municipal lots too with the meters in them, like Royal Oak does, Ferndale does, along with garages.
yeah, I guess when we say parking garage, I mean parking structure or lot.
Okay.
Sorry?
I believe Ferndale does have a parking structure.
Yep.
Thank you, Mara.
So, anybody have any questions? Let's review the shared parking agreement, and I'll defer to Commissioner Lubeck, because I know he's got a question on it.
Just one question?
Yes, we're moving
26
this
parts.
along.
I have a number of questions on it. And it really was, highlighted at the last meeting. In the shared parking agreements, I brought it up in the hearing of the public, that there's a difference between a business that needs 36 spaces and only has 30, and a business that needs 50 spaces and only has 2. Yet in our shared parking agreement, they're treated equally. I don't think they should be. Also, what is the purpose of a special land use? Yes, that's a question.
To whom?
Whoever wants to answer it, I imagine Ms. Brzezowski would be the one that answers it.
Chair? Okay. Well, those are two unrelated questions, but good questions nonetheless. One, yes, the city does have discretion over the amount of parking spaces or over every shared parking agreement. Each shared parking agreement is treated differently because Planning Commission has authority to approve the parking agreement. So you see how many parking spaces the project needs, and how many the project has in supply, and we review that criteria together and approve or deny the parking agreements. City Attorney, can you add any feedback, or did I get that? Okay, thank you. And then the special land use process, that's a great question. Why do we have a special land use? What's the point of it? So the reason why I say it's unrelated, and maybe I'm not missing the transition or the thread here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but some uses in the community we want to have more discretion over. So a perfect example, and not to bring up like a hot topic, but is marijuana. So the city wants to know, I mean, that might be too hot of a topic, I'm sure. Okay. So in order to understand more and have more discretion over where marijuana is permitted within the city, and to allow for marijuana to be in specific locations within the city, we have these uses called special land uses. Are we familiar with all the different 3 buckets of types of uses? Okay, so the first bucket of uses is a permitted use. So it's an automatically permitted use, by right use. Those are all synonyms that a property owner has the legal right to use their property with these automatically permitted uses. And you can see them as a list of uses within each zoning district. So before I go there, here's uses, here are zoning districts. So the zoning districts are other buckets that are categories for the types of uses, and uses fall within the zoning districts. So when we have our commercial district, there's automatically permitted uses, and then another use are special land uses. So these are uses that we still don't mind seeing in a commercial district, but we want a little bit more discretion over. And these can be, like I said, marijuana. Today, they're also in East Point event halls. And what could be another example?
Drive-through restaurants?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Drive-through restaurants. Yeah, 100%. So 7-Eleven? Oh, storage units, 100%. Yes, 7-Eleven. I was like, really? So those are all different types of special land uses that the commission wants to have more regulatory power over, but we might not, we don't really want to ban it, but we might want to allow it still. And I can go into the different standards of how we allow it. And the third and final bucket are not permitted uses. So those are like a gas station in a residential district, or a gas station in our downtown. These are uses that we don't want. They're not permitted here.
Would it be all right to say that with special uses, it's because they may be a little more intense than a permitted use?
Yeah, that's exactly how special land uses are. I mean, there are some different circumstances where the city might just want to have a little bit more say. Like an event hall might not be as intense as a shopping, like any other, a retail place, depending on the size, but the city might want to have more discretion over it. So it might not be intense, it just might be the city wants to maintain regulatory power.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank
now
you
that
for
you've
asking.
explained everything, again, going to a minimum parking standard before you could invoke sharing, probably would be wise to have a higher standard for a special land use that may have a more intense parking need. These are my thoughts on it. Last month, pretty much that business almost fell in the category of we've got 2 spots, but we need way more than 2 spots. In other words, the vast majority of their parking had to come from shared spaces, and a good portion of that encompassed 100% of the municipal spaces in that area. Now, those municipal spaces are there for everybody's use, but a particular business, depending on 100% of those spaces for their shared parking doesn't seem quite right, because they're doing it at the disadvantage of the neighboring businesses. So something, in my opinion, we need to have is some minimum standards and some levels so that we don't have businesses that are obtaining the majority of their necessary parking from shared agreements. Or at least put some minimum level that they have to attain before going out and getting 95 or 100% of their parking from shared agreements.
We do have a number of commercial structures in the city that have no parking spaces whatsoever. There's an example on Old 8 Mile, right next to the, yes, east of the Kennedy building.
You're talking about the old Graycon Westerling building, the printer.
We're talking the one next to ServPro. Again, and that was actually one of my examples. They needed 50 spaces and they only had 2.
And that building actually is the reason why the parking agreement even started taking shape, was because the gentleman wanted to put in an event facility that had no parking. The gentleman that owned the Kennedy building does not want any parking in his lot, and he owns a lot right next door. So that's where this started. And it was a horrible representation of an opportunity for shared parking, because if I remember correctly, he wanted to have people park at the restaurant, but yet he had no approval for the restaurant. Then he had wanted to have people park way down the street, and it just was an absolute nightmare. And then I don't even think he came back after we questioned him about it. But that's what brought the question about a parking agreement into play.
So we've had three people come forward in the past year, that we've had the building department that I know of, and all of those have been, shot down, everything from the childcare to a retail. But they only have 2 spaces, and so it's not gonna work, so that building is gonna sit like that now. We also have situations, this was a question brought up about the event hall in Kelly. We have situations where there's a strip mall and certain owners will not, agree to sign a shared parking agreement. I believe the question came up, there's 5 businesses, but only 3 are agreeing. The other 2 said no, they just don't want to do it, so it does limit. And event hall's off the table, let's talk about, other businesses, that's a whole different topic, but we do have some businesses, some structures that don't have enough parking for anything.
So I guess that is another good question, to review with these legacy businesses that have no parking.
Well, there's something called the Zoning Board of Appeals. If they can prove that they have a hardship, which is a lack of parking, they can get a variance. That doesn't fall under the same standards as shared.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So it is extremely difficult, if done right, to obtain a variance. Cities are notorious for granting variances when they actually should not, because no one really understands the rules of how and when to grant a variance. So we can have a separate conversation and training about zoning variances, but right now we're talking about parking. And this is a real situation. Thank you for bringing up all of these case studies, Assistant City Manager Holman. But I think that East Point's shared parking agreement and the language in the zoning ordinance right now to allow for shared parking is more so cutting edge. This is what cities are using, that we're trending towards this, because we understand, like when we say we don't have parking, there's actually parking around. There are parking lots. There's parking in close vicinity. There's a couple of spaces here and there at properties. There might be 2 at some select properties, but there also might be like 10 at others. So we do have parking, and who knows how much is actually needed or actually required. My answer to who knows how much is needed and required is the property owner, the business. The business owner knows how much parking they need the most out of anyone here in this room. If we own a business, like if I own a business and I'm investing in this and I want patrons to come and I want tenants to come, I want tenants to buy my apartment building, I'm gonna have to have parking for them because I know that that's what's practical here. So the business owner knows best, and from my logic and other research that I've been doing, the city needs to be more flexible because first, the business knows best, and also it's hard to determine from a city standpoint, like offering bucket categories for projects that are very unique. Each project is unique, each property is unique. So it's hard for cities to offer a standard parking amount. And then all of that parking research that is done in the past has just been, it's flawed. We're finding more and more examples of how this parking research is flawed. But I can come back to you in October and have more of a discussion.
November?
After the
November.
October plan, visioning committee meeting.
Yeah.
I have a question, or just an observation here. Because we're not gonna get a solution to this tonight, and dare I say, we're not gonna get a solution to this probably next month either. But it would be interesting to get a map, if possible, and find out where the city lots are, find out, what lots do the city own? I never knew that the city owned the parking on either side of Teppert. I didn't know that the city owns the parking along Kelly Road. It would be nice to get a map that way. And then I don't think it is a bad thing if somebody who wants to open a business in the city actually does a little due diligence and picks the right property for their business, as opposed to just taking a spot because they're getting a really cheap lease and they're expecting the city to just let them do whatever they want for a cheap lease. So it's not unreasonable for us to ask business owners to pick the right building. We have a lot of great business building stock. Ms. O.
Chair, if I may, that is something that we have come to realize. Our former about to change process for businesses coming in, they start the clerk's office to apply for a business license without any information. And then it would go through, finally make its way to the building department, review zoning. So working with the lieutenant team, and Mark's done a great deal of work on this, we are switching that process so that step one will be in the uniforms coming out very shortly. And some of the things we've seen recently have been these applications that were submitted. They thought they were good to go and they didn't have to do this. We have heard they were upset about the time frame, they were upset about the fees that they had to pay from professional land use. It wasn't being done that way in the past. Things were different. But now the process would be that they have to get zoning administrator approval and review. Is it permitted, is it not permitted, or does it require special land use? And if so, this is the time frame and this is the steps. Don't pay rent, don't agree to that, there's no guarantee. So we're switching that whole process around, and the final piece will be the business license application.
Which makes perfect sense.
In that, and I have watched it for years. You have somebody comes in and does exactly what Mr. DeHaan says. Ooh, looky, a building. Ooh, that's great rent. Ooh, let's sign the lease. And then they get to the point where they now have to start dealing with the city, and they're blaming the city for not being business friendly, when in reality, it's the business that's not being East Point friendly. They're trying to put the wrong business in the wrong place. But they've already put the cart before the horse. They're already paying on a lease, and that is somehow our fault. And I disagree with that. I do have a couple other questions pertaining to shared parking. What about ADA? How is shared parking work to be friendly with ADA requirements? And I'm not looking for an answer today. I know you've got the meeting coming up. These are questions that can probably be explored and discussed then and come back with answers. In reading some of this material, something made me extremely happy. The interconnectivity between parking lots. I know we've all experienced it. You're at business A and you need to go to business B, but business B is 150 yards away and you're probably going to make a bigger purchase there. So you'd like to be parked closer, but you can't get from A to B in the parking lots. You have to go out, get into traffic on the street, pull out of traffic on the street into the next parking lot. So the fact that we are definitely looking at the interconnectivity of parking lots is extremely pleasing to me. And a pet peeve of mine, I'm not going to say on the record where the parking lot is, but I've got to take a tape measure out there, but I think they're cheating on the width of their parking spaces. And the other situation is, we went through a period where the size of vehicles were shrinking. Now you're hard pressed to find small vehicles. It's pickup trucks, SUVs, wider vehicles that probably could use a little bit more than 9 feet for a parking space. So if we're going to reduce the number of spaces necessary, maybe we need to look at also increasing the width of the parking spaces, just to save door dings and damage and frustration on vehicles. I think of a grocery store, you got 2 vehicles parked next to each other, and you can't get through with the shopping cart. So maybe we need to look at taking away a spot here or there to make pathways through a parking lot. Again, I'm not looking for answers tonight. I'm putting these things out there so that they can be discussed and brought back. And right now, I believe that's it.
So the one thing I'll add to this is, since we're in uncharted territory, you have the opportunity to be a parking czar and trendsetter, to find the right balance between what we need, what our businesses need, and to meld in this parking agreement so it makes sense for everybody. So would you mind, if anybody is not opposed to this, maybe we can consider tabling this, and let's give you 2 months. Come back and talk about this in December. That way you have plenty of time to do all sorts of research.
So the steering committee, Chair, the steering committee is discussing parking, and they will be voting on what parking requirements they want to see in the zoning ordinance at the October, end of the month steering committee meeting. So we can talk about this in November,
Okay?
if you wish.
That would be October 18th, correct?
No.
Yes.
October 21.
I thought it was 18.
This
the
says
18th.
upcoming meeting dates, October 18th,
And then there's one-
November 22nd,
We
December
changed
1st.
that, Chair?
Go on.
We changed the meeting date for our steering committee meeting. So that'll be in the end of the month, October 27th, I believe.
22nd is a Saturday.
27th.
22nd.
And Chair, I'm unclear. I'm clear that we want to understand the ADA concerns, but I'm unclear as to what else the planning department is tasked to do.
Your task is to look at like communities, see what they're doing for parking, and what their parking, if they have parking agreements, what their standards are. And then let's look at what we're doing, and then let's find a hybrid that's gonna work.
Okay, I hear you, and we are doing that research, but I also heard you say something about the shared parking agreement process and making sure it works for the community. And I don't understand how this parking agreement does not work for you, because we have not talked about the process or the agreement. And it was also passed in 2021.
We just wanna make sure that everything is gelling properly. You know, if our parking standards are outmoded, then maybe we don't need a parking agreement. If our standards are on point, then maybe we do. I just want to have a firm discussion, because this is going to keep coming up. And I will use the word event halls. We're going to get more event halls that are potentially going to come to us and want to do this, and it's going to become an aggravating situation. So it would be nice to have a silver bullet answer. You know, are we going to enforce the parking agreement? Are we going to have a different parking standard that doesn't require a parking agreement? You know, if our standards are outmoded, and if the standards are flawed that are out there in the communities now, then maybe it makes a parking agreement irrelevant.
Well, I would argue that it makes it more relevant because the standards are outdated, and it's hard, like, the whole point is it's hard to measure how much parking someone needs. People have tried. So that's why flexibility within parking and judging each project on a case-by-case basis, and a flexibility within parking by allowing a shared parking agreement and judging each project on a case-by-case basis makes sense.
Okay. What I'm hearing from Ms. Holman about changing the process is, I think, a wonderful first step that hopefully will reduce this potential issue in the future. Let's hear what your steering committee has to say.
Sounds good.
All right. So then can I have somebody make a motion to table this discussion to the November meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Do you have support? Support. We have motion and support. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Lubeck,
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde,
Yes.
Mr. Broll.
Yes.
I'm sorry, before I go on, we're tabling it till?
November.
Thank you. Ms. Muniz?
Yes.
Ms. Julinski, yes. Chairman DeHunt?
Yes. Moving on to unfinished business. Item A, Ms. Brashevsky.
Thank you. Do you have the zoning packets in front of you?
Let's remember this.
The one that says steering committee meeting number 4 agenda?
You got it. Nice
The one
work.
with the wrong October date on it.
Okay, come on, guys.
He's not going to cut any of us any slack, so we're just going to have to suck it up for a while.
Okay. I'm gonna put it on the screen, so our viewers.
Did somebody say how long? I've been gone for 16 months, so there's a lot pent up.
Oh, no.
Not that he was counting.
Here we go. Okay. So the first thing we talked about was the agenda, and we clarified our meeting dates. This meeting is actually the 27th, for your information, from 3 to 5, should anyone plan on attending. But we had a great meeting, and we actually ended on time. It was very efficient. We got through each item. We talked about, like I mentioned, our mixed-use corridor building typologies, also the building form and design standards, materials to be used within the commercial mixed-use corridor, and different signage. So really, we're thinking about our mixed-use commercial corridor still, and our next topic of conversation, it will go into more of the nitty-gritty technical components of planning. So that'll be about site plan and special land use process flow, planning commission, zoning board of appeals. We'll also talk about parking, like we mentioned, landscaping, and plan unit developments. So at first, you guys all received these packets. I asked everyone to identify some concepts within planning that you want a little bit more detail on, and maybe that involves a visual or a graphic. So I'm asking you guys, as the Planning Commission, is there any visuals or specific graphics that you'd like to see within the zoning ordinance to help explain a little bit more difficult or confusing concepts in planning? So some things that were brought up were fences, setbacks, accessory dwelling unit. Someone actually brought up a chicken coop. Are there any concepts that come out to you?
Not chicken coops.
Okay. Okay, well, if none come to mind, feel free to reach me, if some do. And I'm so sorry about this. I am the worst host ever. I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Brigitte Smith. Okay, Brigitte Smith from McKenna. Brigitte just started with McKenna, but has a great experience of urban planning background. And also, sorry?
Can she stand up? Because
Oh.
I'm looking at a piece of wood. Thank you.
Brigitte is the new zoning administrator for the city of East Point. So Brigitte will be here and is excited to work within East Point. Brigitte lives in St. Clair Shores. I'm not sure if you are, how is the relationship between East Point and St. Clair Shores?
At least they're not Roseville.
Oh, okay, it's good. Okay, is it like Ohio and Michigan? I don't know. Okay. Well, that is to say that Brigitte knows a lot about these communities, and we just had a walking tour with Macomb County's economic development team, and Brigitte already had a knowledge of the projects and partnerships through Macomb County. So thank you for coming here, Brigitte, and being part of the team. So moving on to the second topic of the agenda, we want to talk about mixed-use corridor building types. And this is the time for us as the Planning Commission to offer any feedback that you have regarding our mixed-use corridor building types. As you can see within the worksheet, we listed off a couple different typologies. You can see this high-rise. I'll just scroll down to it. A high-rise mixed-use building. We identified that it was up to 7 stories, but this is actually changed to 6 stories per fire marshal guidance. So the definition of a high-rise mixed use is a building that's up to 6 stories in height. It's oriented around the Gratiot Gateway, which is described in the master plan as right here. So we wanted to understand if people appreciated these building typologies there. Other examples are the 4-corner mixed-use mid-rise buildings, Main Street pedestrian-oriented buildings, and so on. So this is a conversation to open up, see if you have any feedback, or Chair, I don't know what direction you'd like to take. Do you want to go one by one?
Let's go one by one.
Okay.
So this is a step towards form-based zoning, more so than use-based zoning.
I love the way you said that. Thank you for mentioning that. Exactly. This is to help developers understand what type of design or form we want buildings to take within the community, and not just regulate building types by use. However, the zoning ordinance will still have a hybrid. It's still use-oriented, but allows for a little bit more visual guidance.
All right, let's go one by one.
Okay, so how do we feel about having a mixed-use high-rise building at the Gratiot Gateway, which is defined right here, or by Gratiot and 8 Mile?
I don't see where you're going to get the land to put something up like this. at least at the 9 Mile down, the Four Corners project. And I can't see somebody wanting to build something like this at 8 Mile. Unless I'm off my rocker.
Well, my opinion, we can't worry about whether there's somebody that wants to do it today. This is planning. Planning is slow cooker mentality, not microwave. If we tell them this is what we're looking for in terms of development, when the opportunity for development comes up, we're much more likely to get what we want. Unlike that debacle at Stevens and Gratiot, where for years the city did not vision that out and decide what they wanted. And when it finally cleared the court case, I think we got something that not very many people in this city are pleased with. And most of them don't understand the fact that it wasn't something that the planning commission or city council could actually stop.
I think that this is a great idea for 8 Mile. I don't see where parking was the one thing that came to my mind when you start talking about the west side of Gratiot. But I think if you put something, or somebody put something like this up, they'd sell all the units quickly. It'd be very welcomed by the residents of East Point.
Now, question on that. Something like that could also include, lack of a better way of describing it, a low-level parking deck, maybe
That's
one
what I
or
was
two
just gonna
levels.
say.
Yes. Chair? So this concept is within the master plan. Master plan, as we know, is a guiding document that truly captures the community's vision for future growth and development of the city. We capture the vision of the community through a series of public meetings, surveys, focus group conversations. So the master plan is a document that represents the community's vision, and this concept was within it. But also, I do want to point out that this agenda is, like, we went and we had a 2-hour-long meeting with this agenda, and I had a timer out. So I would just want to be sensitive to everyone's time here. Do you want to have that sort of organization and spend a couple minutes on each topic?
Yeah, we don't need to go into 2 hours.
Okay. So then moving on, I hear that there's some consensus here. Moving on, the four-corner mid-rise mixed-use building typologies. We discussed that everyone's familiar with the four corners concept. Okay. We discussed what types of buildings we want to see at East Point's iconic four corners, the intersection of 9 Mile and Gratiot. And we wanted to see what parcels of land we would like to have this type of building there. So the steering committee talked a little bit more in depth about this. But ultimately, we voted that we wanted to see it everywhere besides East Point High School, I believe. Brigitte, can you help me with any notes? Okay. So, what are your thoughts on having this type of development at the four corners of East Point?
I think the first two were great and would fit in nicely.
Are you asking us for like specifics on each picture, or, I mean, or these are just concepts, right? It's more conceptual. It's a 3-story mixed-use building. Yeah, yeah, I think it's great too. Yeah, on the four corners.
Any other questions on this group?
I'll say it, I'm not opposed to the idea, I'm just not a fan of that architecture.
Okay. I'll choose better images.
No, I think they're fabulous.
Okay, moving on. Then we also have the standard building typology, a Main Street pedestrian-oriented building. One of these you'll see in East Point, but the concept of this is to have a building that's right at the property line, or what we say a zero lot line in planning. That's what we identify as a zero lot line. A building
Or
right at the
zero
property.
setback.
Yep, no setback, exactly. Well said. So the first story has a minimum of 14 feet in height, and the only reason why we say that is because that's a good practice to require 14 feet in height buildings in our commercial districts, because commercial grade kitchens need to have 14 feet in height. So if we're thinking about the future of a new build, we want the building to be used for whatever capacity in the future. Are you commenting on the lights? Oh, okay. Does anyone notice that?
Ghost of Mildred
Yes.
Stark.
I know.
We're all having the same stroke.
Okay. So this is the Main Street pedestrian oriented building. Let's see where the steering committee wanted this one. Everywhere besides 8 Mile and Stevens, Beaconsfield, and Topher.
Which makes sense, they're all residential streets for the most part.
Why not an 8 Mile?
I think the purpose of this Main Street pedestrian-oriented building is to create a more walkable corridor. And the steering committee didn't see 8 Mile as the walkable corridor. I think they're leading towards treating 8 Mile with like more intensive uses. Well, as intense as East Point allows, but we don't have a. I didn't hear. Oh, ignoring it. Well, we're paying attention to it. Yeah, it's right there. We vote on it anyway.
This would be ideal along Kelly and 9 Mile, in my opinion.
Love that. Okay, thank you for the feedback.
So, and my question would be too, with the zero lot lines, where they'll be, so, and not to compare, but in Grosse Pointe on the hill, and I know we don't have a street like that on Kercheval, but like in the summer, they block like the parking spaces in front of their restaurants to create their outdoor seating.
Mhm.
And, I mean, it's a really great thing.
Are you talking about parklets? So activating the metered space and putting
Right.
the patio? Yeah.
Right, yeah, and move the tables out there, so in the summertime, you can sit outside because they don't have any other outside venue other than that.
Mhm.
And it works really well. I like the concept. I don't know if anybody else does.
No, it's a good concept. I like the second image. The idea of like a rooftop
Yes.
patio or something like that would be really nice.
Mhm.
So just going back to 8 Mile Road on this particular topic. So if I wanted to open a Detroit Wings Company on 8 Mile Road, how would I facilitate that? We have to have how would you facilitate it? I mean, which one of these themes would facilitate Detroit Wings Company on 8 Mile Road?
Well, first, we would look to see where it's zoned right now. So a Detroit Wings Company is considered a retail use, so we'd have to make sure that the parcel of land has the retail use. And I would say, I mean, the Detroit Wings Company, I don't think we're saying, or are we? Let me see. There's more building typologies. So I would say that Detroit Wings Company would have a different building typology than a Main Street commercial pedestrian-oriented building.
One of them that's on this list?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll wait to hear.
Yeah,
what it is.
we have a commercial.
Okay.
So the difference between the Main Street pedestrian-oriented and, like the chair mentioned, like this Main Street pedestrian-oriented building is really meant for our walkable corridors, like Kelly and 9 Mile. The other corridor, like, so it's not that we want to give preferential treatment to different corridors. It's really how do we want to identify those corridors? Like, how do we want to create a neighborhood character? Where do we want to generate a walkable feeling? So that's why we're treating these different corridors in different manners.
You know, I'll tell you who's done a phenomenal job of development, and granted, it's a completely different demographic, and I'm in socioeconomic, whatever you want to call it, but Troy has fought for years to create a downtown district. And I worked out there for 13 years, and you had all this unused space. Now they have all these zero lot line buildings and great restaurants and parking behind, and it looks wonderful. It's attracted a couple of hotels right off of Big Beaver. It's really, it's taken them decades to do it, but they've accomplished it, and now it's a happening place. So it can be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for citing that example. Troy's is being very progressive as they move forward with their development. They've got a good example of what we call liner buildings. It's how I learned about a liner building. But you imagine a parking lot, maybe a Myers right there, and there's a swath of land. But what Troy does is they put a business right at the edge of the parking swath. So when you drive down Big Beaver, there's a business right here, and that is a building that lines the parking. So it is a liner building.
I've also heard it referred to as outlots.
Okay, outlots.
Yeah, again, that's, I think, an evolution out of the old heavily intense need for parking in shopping centers, that they realized they didn't need that parking for the every 100-year major shopping event. So let's put some smaller businesses in there and make use of it.
Okay, on to retail setbacks. So obviously, this building typology is meant to be set back from the street. I think with a landscaped and activated front yard area, I think we all know where this building typology is most relevant, but Kelly Road. Any other feedback on that one?
I'd actually rather see the Main Street pedestrian on Kelly Road than that.
Okay, that's a great point. So the reason why we have this retail setback, are you familiar with the city's right-of-way along Kelly Road?
You mean the parking lots?
Yeah, the parking lots. Okay, so unfortunately, our utilities are buried under the parking lots, so we are unable to put development along Kelly Road right now as it is situated. Perhaps in our 2060 plan, that means 2060, the year 2060, or, down the line, we can resituate how Kelly Road flows and maybe shut down one side of Kelly Road and have the other side. Anyway, I'm getting kind of heady here. But right now, as is, our utilities are buried underneath the parking lot. So we're limited in what we can do. That's why we have this idea to create a pedestrian walkway, which resembles a park. And these ideas are also guided by the master plan.
Where would the parking be if you turn them into green spaces?
Great questions all around. Let me open up, see if this works.
And while we're discussing Kelly, with the parking in front of the businesses actually being city property, don't we have that same situation in the Fairway Shopping Center on 10 Mile Road?
Where? Oh, here.
Because the sidewalk takes a big move inward towards those buildings between the gas station and the restaurant. I don't recall seeing a sidewalk in that greenway along 10 Mile. Fairway. I just find it unusual we don't have a sidewalk along 10 Mile there, in that section, between the restaurant and the gas station.
Okay,
Discussion.
thank you. So can we go back to Kelly Road?
Mhm.
Okay, so at Kelly and 9 Mile, you familiar with English Gardens? They did something clever with their parking lot, which means that they put their parking spaces on a diagonal and made it one way. So with this, they saved on extra room that they use to store, their plants. Sorry? And they built their building closer to the parking lot. So they gained, we estimate 10 to 15 feet by doing this. So we, as a city, are teaming up with our city engineer and are exploring this concept of resituating the parking to be angled so that we get our extra 10 to 15 space here to create a parkway. And this vision is actually, we are applying for a TAP grant, a Transportation Assistance Program grant. I think that's what the acronym is. Okay, to effectuate this vision.
You know, I look at that English Gardens parking lot, and it looks awfully snug if you don't have a big, you have to have a small car. That parking lot looks awfully snug to me. Really?
The driver of a small car.
Yeah, but you have a smaller car.
I
Envision having a
agree,
truck.
But I've never had I don't think that anyone's ever really had a problem with the parking there.
Okay,
Yeah, it's really not.
guess I have to go buy flowers.
But actually, the angled parking is also safer because you're only looking for traffic from one direction.
Huh?
So there's less commotion as well.
Huh?
It organizes the traffic in like a nice orderly manner, and also you gain extra space that you're talking about how in the Gross Points you can dine outside in front of the restaurants. Well, this extra space could also allow for that as well. So it's a really business, especially restaurant-friendly idea to make that extra space. It's also nice and accommodating for pedestrians or people on their bike or families walking together because it creates a larger sidewalk that's in a more uniform pattern as well, from block to block. So it's a great effort
There you go.
that they're already working on the city.
All right.
So that explains the retail setback typology. Are you comfortable with moving on? Commercial buildings. I think the steering committee voted to have these everywhere, obviously. This is just a commercial building that fits every business for Commissioner Roll, your previous question. It's different from the Main Street pedestrian-oriented building because there's no lot line restrictions. Forecourts, this building typology is seen to create courtyards. Where did we say we wanted this one? 10 Mile. 10 Mile, Stevens, Beaconsfield, and Topher. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, moving on. What about Arcade? What? No bias over here. I want a fresh slate.
No.
Maybe it's just a bad picture.
No, it's not going to make it any better. You look at most retail arcades have become obsolete. They had a phenomenal retail arcade in downtown Cleveland. It is a thing of the past.
But it's a covered canopy structure for when it's raining outside, you can still enjoy a cup of coffee.
We're moving forward into the future. We're not going backwards. That's revisionist thinking right there.
I don't know, I love it, but I mean, I was voted down, so I'll just accept defeat gracefully.
Well, if you want to talk about going backwards, that would be taking Kelly from 4 lanes down to 2 lanes.
Yeah.
So sometimes forward is backward.
True.
Yeah, okay. If you're helping me out, okay. The stoop. So this building typology is for residential development. It's just to create a stoop or front porch. We said that it was appropriate in Stevens, Beaconsfield, and Topher. Do you guys have any other locations to add? Okay, moving on to live, work, unit. This we see usually, so first let me define it. It's a space where an artisan or, I don't know, like a business can open up, and then they also live within that same structure. So it's a live, work unit.
Again, a move backwards.
Sure, perhaps. Do you have any direction of where you'd like to see these? Or not see these? We said that they would be appropriate in Stevens, 10 Mile, Kelly. Not Kelly?
Not feeling it.
I mean, when I say we, I'm being inclusive. This is the steering committee's feedback.
Where do they see it?
They said Kelly, Stevens, and 10 Mile, but I agree. I don't know if I see it along Kelly.
What about the Gratiot non-downtown?
Yeah. What? I think these are most popular in our lighter industrial corridors. So I could see this along Stevens for sure. I mean, maybe Kelly. Now thinking about it a little bit more. 10 Mile.
Well, keep in mind, Kelly is about 2 miles long.
Mm-hmm.
There are different sections in there that could offer different ideas.
Okay. Any other feedback on that? Thank you. Landmarks, landmark buildings. Where do we want to see these? Well, we voted that we want to see them in Gratiot, downtown, or 9 Mile. Do you guys agree with that?
We've torn down most of our landmark buildings in that area.
But when we want to create new ones, Chair,
They won't be landmarks then.
they will be to someone someday. An identifier.
Maybe not the best example of a landmark building that we do have left. Can't remember the name of it, but it's at Stevens and Gratiot.
What is that building? It's where
I
Friends
wanted,
Bar is.
yeah.
What-
I
what's-
almost said Strohschein's Bar. Boy,
Yeah, but the name of the building, I mean, Kaiser was at 9 Mile. I don't remember what's the
I
name
don't know if it
of
was-
it.
I got it, guys.
Kern,
No.
Heinz.
No.
There is a big cement brick sign at the top of the building that says what it is. Kaiser?
Here?
No, Kaiser was
was
at
torn
9
down.
in Gratiot.
It's Friends Tavern, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the building.
Mm.
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is probably the closest thing we get above.
Oh, okay.
Okay, move a little bit to the right. Oh, the other right.
It's a clock.
No, go over above the Verizon sign.
What?
Yep, keep going. Go to the, more to the right. Right there in that.
There it is.
Oh.
Is it Stevens, I bet?
It could be.
We're getting lost in the weeds here, I fear.
But anyway.
All right,
Everyone will meet thereafter, eh?
moving on.
Okay. On to where? Oh, so landmark buildings. We're good? Okay. Apartment buildings. Where do we, let's say this. Where do we not want to see strictly apartment buildings within these commercial corridors? Where do we not want them? Is it easier to say where do we want them?
I don't think I would want to see anything like this on Topher. Or, well, there's already apartments on Beaconsfield. Or Stevens.
Okay, so let's pay attention to the description here, not the image. So the description is a multi-story building with 3 or more residential units. These all have more than 3 residential units.
So, no, I'd rather see something like that than an apartment building.
Okay, in the steering committee, we said we wouldn't mind seeing apartment-only buildings along Kelly, Stevens, Beaconsfield, and Topher. Are you guys interested in that?
I'm not.
So what would you like?
Well, again, I think we look at any one of these main roads and we can figure they're all about roughly 2 miles long. That leaves a lot of opportunity for different sections within that 2 mile stretch. And I looked at some of these apartment buildings and I start thinking of Stevens, west of Hayes, maybe east of Hayes, as far as Grove or maybe even Gratiot. Or not as far as Gratiot, maybe Flower.
Chair, so something that urban planners are talking about now is allowing for apartment-only buildings because the latest trend is requiring mixed-use development in our commercial corridors. And that's problematic because not everyone wants to open a retail business nowadays. Retail businesses are getting harder and harder to open with, I mean, we all know the global competition and the internet. So it's good to allow for apartment buildings and not require retail to cater to this demand.
I think our perfect example of that was that storage unit that promised all the retail.
You mean the people that haven't even finished the first floor buildings?
Yeah, them.
The liars?
Moving on.
With that being said, do you have any other feedback on apartment buildings?
I think Beaconsfield's a good area for it.
Okay.
It would blend with the existing apartments that are on there now, too.
Well, and that's what I was actually thinking of.
You mean the ones that are in St. Clair Shores?
But
Correct.
it would blend with the community.
All right, townhomes.
What about something, because Chairman DeHaan brought it up before. We're talking about some of our larger pieces of land that churches and schools, specifically areas like that might be suitable for something like this.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what we are thinking about is zoning that as a planned unit development or zoning it as residential. But projects can always apply for a planned unit development. And we all know that a planned unit development allows for flexibility within setbacks and other technical criteria in the zoning ordinance, parking standards, landscaping standards. And the Planning Commission, views planned unit developments on a case-by-case basis. So for a bigger parcel of land, it's smarter to have a planned unit development than prescribe traditional zoning strings to it. Okay, townhomes. Is there anywhere you don't want to see townhomes? Steering committee directed us to see them along Gratiot, Downtown, Kelly, Stevens, Beaconsfield, and Topher.
I'm sorry, that's where they wanted or did not want?
They want to see them.
And those were where?
Gratiot, Downtown, Kelly, Stevens, Beaconsfield, Topher.
Boy, Kelly, Stevens, Beaconsfield, and Topher's gonna have a lot of stuff on it.
Forgive me for saying, but I think the steering committee has just about suggested every road for every concept.
I just said that.
Well, yeah, you said that, yeah, but I'm looking at everything, it's like,
It's a diversity and mixed uses.
And again, with a 2 mile stretch of road, you can have that mix. You don't necessarily have to lock in one of them.
Would you guys really want to see this on Gratiot downtown?
not at all.
I wouldn't.
No.
I mean, I like the concept
No.
of four corners, so,
Okay,
yeah, that would be the one
Agree.
I'd strike off that list.
I agree.
Everything else was good with me.
I don't even know if I would put it anywhere down Gratiot. Just the sheer volume of traffic and the speeds at which, I just don't think it'd be safe. I would, you know,
Okay.
and to me, that would also exclude 9 Mile and 10 Mile.
Well, and when you're talking Topher, where are we talking on Topher? Like when replacing houses or?
No, there's a small commercial district, not district, but there's some commercial buildings along Topher. So that's why we wanted to include Topher within our analysis of, the East Point Commercial District.
Well, I think the ones you're referring to on Topher are actually the
Yeah,
cross
why?
streets of other main streets, such as Gratiot and Kelly. Although there are a number of schools and churches on Topher that could present future possibilities.
Yeah. Okay, so moving to parking structures. We said that we only want to see parking structures in Gratiot, non-downtown.
Non-downtown?
Yeah, or the high school next to the DDA. Is that right? Did I get that right?
I find that interesting, given all of our conversation tonight about the problems with shared parking. So,
I think this is technically talking about a parking structure, like actual parking garage. But where would you like to see them?
well, yeah, and I guess I only say that because to me, I would think if we were going to look at adding parking, you want to add parking where you really want, where people would typically be centrally located, which to me would be downtown, so.
Little tidbit of information, since I seem to be the, once again, resident historian. There was at one time a discussion of a low-level parking deck behind the library.
Oh, I was going to bring that up.
Okay.
So,
We also talked about a farmer's market over there too.
but yeah, it would seem to me like a parking structure, one of the first places you'd want to put one is in a downtown area. If you're looking at having a walkable downtown.
I agree. I think we have to look at the parcel, like see where the parcels are. I think the reasoning in the steering committee is that they didn't want to see a parking structure occupy one of their sensitive parcels that contribute to the Downtown Development Authority tax increment financing district. They wanted to see parcels for parking adjacent to the downtown, but I also think, the downtown's a good idea too. It just depends on the parcel.
We don't have a very big downtown, so like adjacent to, the peripheral, right around the downtown would be ideal in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, and again, that would go back to the concept earlier of having possibly some retail, maybe some residential above the retail with a parking structure as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Do you feel comfortable?
Give the residents the nice covered parking spaces and have the upper open deck for the visitors.
Okay. Do you feel comfortable moving on?
Yes.
Okay. So the second worksheet, we kind of talked in detail about everything on here just now. But I just want to show you a couple of things. This talks a little bit more about the building form and design standards for each key building typology. So one key building typology is the high-rise mixed-use building. And we actually created these graphics to put in the zoning ordinance to help guide developers on what type of building we're looking for. But also, not only that, understand where or how to define the minimum building height. So you would see wherever A is, I just threw this in, this might be not a good example. But let's go to the Four Corners mid-rise mixed use. So you look at A, and A shows you how high we want the building to be. So this defines from A to the floor, the height. we put in this example, well, first of all, to help clarify what technical zoning standards are, and then also to show developers that we're interested in more visually appealing buildings if we're building new. So we are going to edit some of the colors and placement of the letters that you see. But other than that, do you have any feedback on this worksheet too?
So this reminds me of a building and thinking about on Kelly. I know those are all medical, mostly Tunning Kelly. But there's a building that has a lot of medical offices that I've seen, like a restaurant in the basement. And then on the top floor, they have the open dining out there as well. And they do have like a little shop in there. But that's kind of like putting a lot under one umbrella and works well.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so I can just show you the pictures because I'm happy that we were able to produce these for you. So, pedestrian-oriented building. This is all for East Point, like unique to East Point. So I think this is really cool. Our retail setback example, apartment example, and then townhomes. Okay, so going into worksheet 3. Are we comfortable with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So the purpose of this exercise is to show everyone that no matter what the material is, if it's a favorite material that everyone has, no matter what it is, we can't control the end result. So no matter how hard we try, we can't control the end result with a blanket ordinance. We have to treat each site plan on a case-by-case basis and review all of the building elevations on a case-by-case basis. But we can do our best to offer standards, and this is why we're talking about this today. Okay, so the first material we discussed is brick, and we can see what might be a good and bad and ugly example of when brick is used.
I agree that Jake's Way sports bar in blue and gold looks horrendous.
I have an observation, if I may. This is just occurred in the last 2 weeks. The old attorney's office at Forest and Gratiot is now green with cartoon animals, and I wonder if they got licensing from Disney to put Mickey on there, and I'm wondering if they got licensing from Jim Henson to put all those Muppet animals on there. It's cute. It looks horrible. It's on the other side. Other side. Here we go. Go back. Stop. That building is now green with animals and Muppets all over it. I mean, it's really bold. Have you seen it?
I buy it all the time.
It's very bold.
Do they have to have a permit to do that?
At one time, I know they called it neon or fluorescent paint colors were not permitted in the city. I don't know if that ordinance is still on the books or not.
It might be something to look into.
So the planning department reviews and planning commission reviews site plans. So when a project triggers a site plan requirement, then we have authority in reviewing this work. But other than that, we'd have to talk with the building department.
You should drive past. It's cute. It's very interesting.
Okay.
Sorry, I got us off topic. Let's get back on topic.
And the animals might be considered murals, which falls under a whole different set of rules. Rich is cringing over there.
Okay, so back to the brick. We voted we want to see this everywhere. We might want some restrictions on painted brick.
Yes.
Okay. So we're all in agreement. Moving on. Stone. The committee said they wanted to see it everywhere.
Not
I don't like stone.
necessarily. It's cold. It's just,
You guys tore me apart on arcades. I don't like stone. Just gonna put it out there.
doesn't have to be everywhere.
Is there anywhere you do not want to see stone?
Cemetery.
With your name on it?
I mean, where wouldn't you want to see stone? That's the only thing. So,
I don't want to see stone along Gratiot
why
or
not?
9 Mile.
If it's tastefully done, therein lies the one word, tastefully done, or
That's fair.
tastefully. If it's tastefully done, then we're good.
That's fair. So
But
fair.
taste is so.
It is subjective, I understand. You know, some people like the green Muppets and I don't, but
Okay, moving on to wood. We agreed to have this everywhere. Okay. CMU, concrete masonry units, we wanted to have a restriction on this. So the building can't be more than 30% CMU.
I'm gonna go back to wood real quick. The wood is nice, but it also requires a lot more work and maintenance to keep it looking good and nice over a long period of time. So,
There are now engineered woods that are virtually maintenance-free.
I don't know that I would want to see wood everywhere. I think it gives an old world feel that if we're moving forward, do we really want to go backwards towards? I mean, I think you can modernize it, but to say I'd want to see it everywhere, I no more want to see that everywhere than you'd want to see the stone everywhere.
That's a great point, and you know, we will look at each project on a case-by-case basis. But I also want to bring up the conversation that we had at the steering committee meeting. Wood is one of the most sustainable and cheapest materials to use for a building, so it's actually one of like the top 5 recommended materials for building with facade.
don't necessarily want cheap though. And I would think from a
Okay.
fire perspective, wood is a disaster waiting to happen, as opposed to stone.
No, wood. Come on, fire marshal. Wood is now treated. We've developed systems to treat wood and create buildings to be fireproof that are constructed of wood, and basically all buildings have wood infrastructure already. Okay.
Well, then I think treated wood on the outside with rain leaching chemicals into our water supply system.
Stone doesn't burn.
It's actually more sustainable to use wood than stone and cement and concrete, both in how concrete and cement are processed, but also in terms of, like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fumes that are released in processing cement and refining stones and shaping and carving stone. So if you look at the life cycle process of building, in terms of structurally sound material, wood is one of the best materials to use, especially in low to mid-rise buildings, because it's a strong, supportive material. So I understand like the apprehension about maybe the aesthetic that it brings, but it could be a restricted use. For example, like 30% of the building can be wood, or wood on the first floor. Exterior, or not on the first floor exterior, something like that. So it could be a restricted use material, but it's one of the more sustainably sound construction materials.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to concrete masonry units, we said that we wanted to restrict this, so no more than 30% of the building would be composed of CMU. What are your guys' thoughts?
Less.
Oh, sorry. This is CMU.
Well, unless we're building a prison, I don't care for figure 8 at all.
Yep. It's all concrete. It's all falls under one. So case by case basis. I mean, honestly, this exercise is probably the most important part of this exercise, just to get more familiarity with materials as a planning commission.
I
It's
guess
going to be hard to regulate.
I guess let's say it this way, if we're going to allow that, then I think we also need to have some fenestration requirements on it. So we don't have a building that looks like a prison.
Okay, we will write no prison-looking buildings.
Next.
Moving on. Fiber cement siding or panels, I think, did we say we want this everywhere? Yeah. I think we said we wanted to allow this everywhere.
What did you say about CMU? Was that everywhere? Where was that?
That was everywhere but restricted to 30%, or less of the building.
I think Commissioner Yansky said the word less than 30%.
Yeah.
I would concur.
Okay.
10.
And a minimum of 25% fenestration.
Okay. Fiber cement, we good with this one?
Yep.
I'm not familiar with it.
Honestly, me either. These are just the pictures.
It looks good, though.
Okay. Precast concrete panels.
No.
Well, this is important for areas that we want to allow our lighter industrial uses. And so the steering committee saw this along 8 Mile and 10 Mile. But yeah, the purpose is to show you like some bad examples or examples when it's used right.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Exactly.
It's the chapter, title of this chapter.
Okay, next.
Definitely figure 8 is ugly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Next.
Okay. Ceramic cladding. We wanted to allow this everywhere. Oh, except for Stevens, Beaconsfield, and Topher. Oh,
Except for.
yeah. I just saw my notes. I circled.
I just wanted to make sure I was understanding what side Stevens, Beaconsfield, and Topher were.
So earlier on in our engagement, a month, 2 months ago, we produced boundary maps of the commercial corridors. And if you remember, well, I don't know if you remember because you were out here, but we sent commissioners packets to research their neighborhoods. I can reintroduce the boundary maps at the next meeting as a refresher.
It's fine.
Okay. All right, ceramic cladding. You guys good with this? Isn't it
Yeah.
beautiful? I think it's beautiful. Okay. Stone composite panels. We said we wanted this everywhere besides Stevens, Beaconsfield, and Topher.
Yeah.
Why are you laughing?
I don't want that downtown.
No.
Really?
No.
Pop of color?
Wear red shoes. No, not that.
All right. Well, okay. Please offer more feedback. Where do you want to see it?
St. Clair Shores.
Oh.
You have, I'm not trying to be smart here, but with what we've seen thus far, and granted, this is all going to happen when our grandchildren are dead, there's way more beauty in some of the stuff that you've shown us prior than that. That's a modern art conglomeration.
So you don't see a pop of color in these building typologies within, let's say, one of these, where is it?
I like a pop of color,
Four corners?
but not all that color.
No, it's overwhelming. It's visually overwhelming. It's busy.
Gratiot corridor?
No.
A pop, yes.
That is just visually overwhelming.
Okay, so you want this to be restricted?
I'll be dead and gone by the time this happens, but I just don't want to see it. Sorry. I like stone, you don't. Tomato, tomato.
I mean, it's a
it's not just
preference,
me,
right? It's a preference.
steering
I don't like it either. I don't, what does everybody else think? I'd be happy to never see that in East Point.
I wouldn't mind, like a couple of those panels here and there, but yes, not that much. I'd rather see a mural.
She's saying less than 30%.
All right, we want to
Thank you.
restrict this in some places. but not getting specific. All right, well, if you come to it and if you think about where you don't want to see this, let me know.
East Point.
Down.
8 Mile,
The steering
Gratiot,
committee voted for
Gratiot
it.
downtown, 9 Mile. 10 Mile.
All. the
We
above.
can put it on Stevens, Beaconsfield, and Topher, though.
Okay, I guess I'm caught in the middle. I'm gonna move on.
Go ahead.
The closed cavity facade, so this is a glass curtain wall. We said that this would be interesting along Gratiot.
Only in buildings over 6 stories.
So Gratiot Gateway.
Jeff's on today.
Right?
He is on.
He's back.
Okay, glass, so a component of tinted glass. We said Gratiot and 9 Mile would be appropriate.
I guess it would depend on what it's in.
On 9 Mile?
The idea of 9 Mile in the conversation was to use this material as a guide for people to understand they're in East Point's key shopping district.
I dispute that theory, though, because we're saying 9 Mile is the central business district. And then in the same breath, we're saying that 9 and Gratiot is the key district. It's not necessarily the key district. If the vision plays out, the key district will be 9 Mile in its entirety.
I don't understand what you just said. 9 Mile Main Street. We're talking about creating
The
Main
vision,
Street.
the vision of the master plan when we did it was to make 9 Mile the central business district. The DDA is an important part of it, but they're not the only part. There is all of 9 Mile that deserves as much love, in my opinion, as the DDA does.
Chair, I think we're on the same page here. I said, the steering committee and you are on the same page. The steering committee said to use this finish for Gratiot and 9 Mile.
All right, I'm sorry, I heard Gratiot and 9 Mile. I'm assuming you were speaking just that intersection.
Oh, no, okay, yeah.
Okay.
I believe
that-
that would be referred to as 4 corners.
The 4 corners with the pink glass.
Is that anywhere on Gratiot then? Downtown and non-downtown?
Yeah. All right, so excited to hear your feedback on this one. I'm looking at all your faces. Green facade.
Where's Walt with his trees?
An excellent place for this would be a church located next to a nursery.
And they ripped all of theirs off.
Here, what's your,
I have a photo from.
Where is
I
it?
recently visited Grand Rapids. It's on my phone.
well, what address is it?
No coincidence Walt walked out just before that presentation.
Nope.
No coincidence on that at all.
And they have a.
But they're not trees.
They're green.
It's like a 10 by 5 green facade. So it's just a small segment of the building that you walk past. So it's at eye level. So it's just a nice break from.
Was it here?
It's on the street. It's outside right there. But it's not up right now in that photo. You can't see it. But instead of that paneling there that you see like the weird line.
Could you use the microphone, please?
Yes.
Push the button.
Okay. So they replaced the paneling on the side of the building with a green facade. So it would just be that they used it in just that segment of the building. And it's a really nice break from an otherwise boring and off-putting siding.
Softens the look up.
It softens the look, yeah. So it's at pedestrian level. It's really nice.
Is it real greenery?
Yeah, it's have to look at my photo here, but it's.
So kind of like
it's
they
a
do with
moss.
the airport too.
Yeah, and it actually helps with air quality as well, because moss is good for removing the pollution from the cars that drive by, etc.
But we're going to all electric vehicles, so that's not going to be a concern.
Well, and I would think it would depend on the greenery, honestly.
I think the imagery is what's distorting it for me. I think there would be better imagery.
Sure. I can just show you on my phone here.
Because I don't really care for those three, the good, the bad, the ugly. I can't decipher between any of those. That would be, yeah, I like that. It reminds me of like the airport.
So yeah, this one would have been a restricted material use. So it's not too overwhelming, but it's nice.
It's controlled.
It's controlled. It's maintained.
Well, we're going to put trees on buildings.
So where would you like to see this? Will you show, where would you like to see this? Or not like to see this, whatever?
I would say if we were to do something at all and do it along the lines of what she just showed us, then I would say do it in the most walkable space, which to me would be Gratiot downtown, and make it very controlled. I personally don't like greenery growing on buildings. That's just a personal mental preference aesthetically, but if we're gonna do it and do it in a controlled manner like that, then I think you want it in an area where people are walking, where you expect them to be walking. And then even in terms of its impact on the environment, you want it in the place where it could be the most effective, which would be in a highly trafficked area, so.
Okay, thank you. Moving to metal wall panel.
Container home
I was
communities.
just going to say that.
So we just wrote, this needs restrictions on amount of use. So
What?
percentage restrictions for the building.
Should
So
be no
they
use.
said anywhere, just as long as there's restrictions on the percent.
What do you want?
Uh,
I think this is appropriate for more industrial uses.
Yes.
But probably we don't want to see a whole building made of it. I mean,
Correct.
this is, we have transparency through the windows here, but this looks like this building is made mainly of metal. But the steering committee was favorable to this.
Not with me. I'd say 0.
Okay, so we know we need restrictions. Vinyl.
No.
Okay. What a hard conversation, right? It's hard to do this. So thanks for your stamina. We're almost through it.
Yeah, on vinyl, I leave that in residential communities.
Okay. Sounds good. Exterior insulation finishing system. We said we don't want to see this anywhere.
Really?
Right?
I'm a little surprised by that, but
And then stucco, the same thing. Okay. Parking locations, we were guided to kind of just skip through. The main part of this exercise is to understand how we want to orient our parking in each corridor. But the goal is to have parking in the rear. So for the future, the goal is to have parking in the rear of the building. That's just best planning practice. So that's why we moved through this kind of quickly. Do you have any thoughts other than having rear parking in any of these corridors?
Nothing here.
Okay. We also asked about understanding if you want us to require bicycle or electric vehicle parking. Are you interested in requiring that in anywhere?
No.
I'd be more open to bicycle parking than electric vehicle parking and leave that up to the businesses. if they feel that that's gonna be a draw for people to visit them, then, but I don't know that I would wanna require that.
Are there any areas in particular you would like to see bicycle parking required?
Near bus stops.
Yeah.
I know
I
that's
really like
kind of an odd answer, but
Don't we already have along Gratiot, there's bike parking? Or you mean right at the bus stop?
right at the bus stop, for someone who might want to ride their bicycle to the bus stop, but then not load their bicycle up.
Yeah,
Take on the
I've
trip
seen
with
them,
them.
yeah.
Okay, and so then the last exercise is on signage. So we provided a list of all the different types of possible signs to allow in East Point and discussed where we want to see these signs. But one quick, like feedback on signs or like quick fact is that by amending our sign ordinance and where we do want to see different types of signage and not is a quick fix to allow for a more interesting business design. So, what did I say here? A high quality awning or canopy sign could improve the character of a commercial corridor. So by allowing or requiring these signs, small changes such as this can make a corridor more walkable, unique, and inviting.
I believe they are already allowed. Canopy signs.
The idea here is to guide the developer in producing a sign, a specific sign for an area.
And you would have to use the existing sign as one of the signs in buildings that just irritates me more than anything.
This is exactly why I put this here, because what if we saw something like this? A canopy sign or awning sign along Kelly at one of these businesses.
Much improved.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
like
by
Giuseppe's.
changing our ordinance in this small way, we
without
are
the bulk.
improving the design of the building.
Prime example is that lady who got the event hall. When I said that the building was unattractive, this would be a perfect example of taking an unattractive building and making it attractive.
They're not
Yeah.
cheap.
I know. But it's an investment in the city. If you want to be in the city and make money in the city, you
Not
should invest.
disagreeing.
Have you seen the southern half of that complex that was formerly Papa John's? I know they're working on it, but I don't know that it's that much more attractive.
So with the steering committee, we talked about all of the different signs. I think we went through the sign definitions and kind of picked and chose what we like. But let me just read you the review, and that might be easiest. So, favorite signs are awning and projecting signs. So an awning sign is something like this, illustrated here. A projecting sign is, let's go up right here. So it's projecting outward into the street. And then restricted signs include, but are not limited to, the changeable signs. So those are the signs that have flashing messages. Or we can change the messages within. It doesn't have to be electronic, sorry.
Personal point of view, if you got rid of changeable copy signs that were not electronic, it would, in my opinion, be an improvement. Because those are the signs that go out there. And if the business closes or just doesn't care, the message stays up there forever. Get a good windy day and half the message blows away. I am not a fan of the changeable copy signs that are not electronic.
Okay.
And I'll back up to the Papa John's. I don't know if it's still in the sign ordinance, but at one time there was a requirement that when a business closed, they needed to take down their signs. think it's probably 4 or 5 years that those Papa John signs are up there. And occasionally, extremely bright light, roping light in the windows at night on a business that is not operating.
Okay, another example that the steering committee wanted to see restricted was a marquee sign. They still allow it's kind of very similar. They allow, it's a changeable copy sign, so it's still a changeable sign. Anyway, this is one example. Another one, oh, I'm interested in your feedback on this one, is a sandwich board sign. What do you guys think about sandwich board signs?
I know we use them now. I know some businesses use them now. I don't see them very effective because they're so small to begin with. And a good stiff wind is going to knock them over.
And I believe they're only allowed in the DDA at the moment.
We talked about in the steering committee that sandwich board signs are tools to, placemaking tools, so to attract foot traffic on the street, because the sign acts as a decor, but also an announcement that at eye level that there's a business there. So I think we said we like to see it only if there's enough space, only if there's enough pedestrian right-of-way space.
Fair.
Okay. And was there another one that we want? There's a couple more that we wanted to see restricted, but one was a roof sign. So a sign that is erected, constructed, maintained against or above the roof.
I'm from East Point. What's a roof sign? Those have been banned for decades.
Are they still banned?
But it was allowed for Foot Locker, and it looks very good, and it's very tasteful.
Well, that's not what you would consider a typical roof sign.
True, but, some may consider it a roof sign.
A roof sign, typically a roof sign, you think of a pole sign, but mounted on a roof instead of a pole.
So some feedback that we received is to have examples. We'll do our best for all of the signs. We offer some examples here in the margin. Other than that, do you have any other comments on signs?
What was the feedback on electronic signs?
Electronic signs. Oh, yeah. Just the typical standards, not having the words or lighting change. Monitoring the timing of the words and lights, but that's, I think it's state law, to be honest.
Yeah, okay. I personally don't like electronic signs. I mean, I can't see it on 9 Mile, for instance. If we're gonna go for a quaint awning-filled,
Okay.
row of buildings, then to offset it with electronic would look terrible.
Anything else for us?
Let me see here. No, that was fantastic, Chair. Thank you for helping facilitate this conversation.
All right, I think that was it for unfinished business. We shall move on to the last hearing of the public. You have 3 minutes to speak. Does anybody wish to be heard? Anybody wish to be heard? Seeing none, we will close the second hearing of the public, and we will move on to training. We have no training, correct? I see training on the agenda.
No training, it's just placeholder.
So we have no, can we now put that on if we don't have training?
Sure.
Just leave it empty. If there's no training, just leave it empty. All right, moving on. Commissioners' comments. We will start in the audience with Ms. Holman. Any comments, questions, concerns?
No, I appreciate the conversation. We're looking forward to seeing these ordinance changes in writing so that this commission can go through the details.
Thank you. Fire Marshal? Mr. Albright?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to welcome Ms. Smith. I just met her for the first time this evening, and welcome back Mr. Lubeck.
Ms. Brashevsky?
Thank you. Thank you for all for your participation today. I know it's kind of end of the workday, so appreciate your feedback and hanging in there. We got this.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you for the warm welcome, and I look forward to being back next month.
And maybe one day we'll see your face from behind the wood. Commissioner Lalonde?
Just want to welcome Jeff back to the commission. Looking forward to working with you in the future. That's all I have.
Commissioner Ulinski?
Oh, well, welcome back, Jeff. Welcome, Brigitte. And I just wanted to say it's October, Breast Cancer Awareness, so for all the survivors and people going through it, just, you know, the walks are coming. My 80-year-old mother still does the breast cancer walk. She's awesome. 22 days, I'm going to be a mother-in-law. I'm very excited about that. And, yeah, I guess that's about it. And welcome to our new animal control officer and our new firemen. We had a new fireman, yep. And I believe a new police officer, so welcome everyone to the East Point. And that's it.
Commissioner Muniz?
I just want to say thank you to Ms. Brashevsky, as I just tear your name apart, and Ms. Smith just for that exercise and taking us through that and all of the feedback and explanations, because things that we might not think are aesthetically pleasing may actually be beneficial to our community. So thank you for taking the time to give us clarity on that. And I want to welcome Mr. Lubeck back, even though I think he's one of the people that I'll probably learn an incredible amount about, since he's been around for a good amount of time. So
You almost
No, you had
said
it right forever.
didn't you?
not really, but and I just, you know, I think tonight the exercise in going through looking at our city and looking at the future development is an encouragement to me as a resident and as a young mom, that I want the city of East Point to be its very best, not just in looks, but in the quality of the people who not only live here, but also facilitate the administration of our city. And I think given the staff that put in the hard work on a day-to-day basis and those who serve in volunteer roles on the commission, I think our future is very bright. That's all.
Commissioner Lubeck?
Okay, I'll give everybody a chance to go to the restroom and grab a beverage, because we're going to be here a while.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
That's why I love this group. First, welcome Ms. Smith. I'm glad to be back. I've been passionate about planning in the future of East Point for decades. Found a way to get involved, finally got to work on a master plan that I can believe in, and now actually start implementing parts of that. It's kind of like we used to do the master plan, throw it on the shelf, pull it out in 5 years, dust it off, say, okay, throw it back up on the shelf for another 5 till we had to redo it. It's exciting to see the changes at City Hall, especially in the building department, and trying to move things out of methods that I say had us stuck in the mud. There's still going to be times when we're going to struggle, but I think we have to keep in mind, I said it earlier tonight, that planning is slow cooker and not microwave. We're not going to have this happen overnight. With that said, I'm glad to be back working with this group, and I'm glad you guys appreciate me for my uniqueness. And now comes to the part that's difficult to say. I'm I'm sorry, that's for the hearing of the public, Chairman. I let you have your moments of fame, so I'm expecting the same. But anyway, I'm extremely glad to be back, but it's extremely disappointing that it was at the loss of Commissioner Palazzola. That man is just a creative thinker. He thinks outside of the box. His depth of knowledge in planning, I'm almost going to say, is close to second to none. The city really lost something when his job requirements changed and he could no longer be here with us. And those are going to be some tough shoes to try to fill. I'm hoping at some point maybe we can regain his expertise back up here, because he sure moved us light years ahead from what we were struggling with before. At that, congratulations, mother-in-law to be. And I'll conclude my comments.
Mr. Broll?
Welcome back, Jeff. It's good to have you back. I guess my only comment is regarding the steering committee, the work they put in, Ms. Brashevsky's work on this and the visuals, and there's just a ton of work. It's very valuable, and I appreciate the effort that that committee and you have put into creating this packet. Thank you. So that's it.
Mara, I think you should ask all of them, though. I noticed on these pictures, these are the pictures that were all on a lot of them on the boards where you had to vote. Did you guys ever vote on any of these, by the
did.
way?
All right.
Obviously, the ones I voted on didn't show up.
Moving on. Welcome back, Commissioner Lubeck. Part of the thing that makes this commission work is we like each other, we have fun, we respect each other. We don't always agree on things. Sometimes we have consensus, sometimes we don't. But we talk it through. And we like to have fun. Hence, playing with the hourglass. Because that is what we're about. The city has gotten way too negative. We've gotten way too many bad raps, and we need to have some fun. And we need to smile, and there needs to be some sincerity from this counter, dais, whatever you want to call it. So with that said, I hope everybody has a wonderful month, and I will get to the new person at some point. I'm on my soapbox. Yeah, I'll get, Leo, didn't you already welcome Jeff? You welcome Jeff. You're ruining my flow. I'm not going to forget Leo. But with that said, we need to have some fun in the city, and that's that. I've lost my train of thought. Everybody, thank you very much for your interest. Thank you for the people who came out that don't normally come out. They're all few but faithful. God love you. So, with that, may I have a motion for closing?
Support?
We have motion and support. Secretary, please call the roll.
Ms. Muniz?
Yes.
Mr. Broll?
Yes.
Mr. Lalonde? Ms. Julinski, yes. Chairman, Mr. Lubeck?
Yes.
Yes, I almost did it. Chairman DeHunt?
Yes.